on June 9th, a man walked onto a stage in Phoenix, threw his arms open, and shouted 2 words at the crowd. "Who's with me?" Then he just stood there for 15 full seconds, soaking up the noise. 24 hours later, that man's new Netflix special was the 3rd most watched thing on the entire platform. And the people turning on it the hardest weren't the critics who always hated him. They were his own fans. And that's only half the story. The same man told one joke at a Netflix roast that split the comedy world in half. Comedians on one side, Joe Rogan calling them traitors on the other. So how does one comedian end up with his own diehards turning him off? And half of comedy at war over a single punchline? This isn't a story about one bad hour of comedy. It's about who decides you're a star before you open your mouth. Let's start with the collision at the center of all this. Netflix is the most powerful tastemaker in stand-up alive. A special on that platform can turn an unknown into a headliner overnight, and Netflix handed that stage to Tony Hinchcliffe. If that name only half rings a bell, this is why. In October 2024, at a Donald Trump rally inside Madison Square Garden, Hinchcliffe called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah.
The backlash was instant, and it came from both parties. Even the campaign scrambled to distance itself. Trump later claimed he had no idea who the guy even was. Here's the part that actually matters. That moment didn't end his career, it launched it. He'd already gone mainstream that same year, roasting Tom Brady on Netflix. The rally made him a household name, for all the wrong reasons, and the industry's answer was to give him more. Which is the question this whole story keeps circling. If controversy only makes him bigger, who exactly is deciding that? This past May, Netflix aired The Roast of Kevin Hart. Shane Gillis hosted. The dais was stacked: Jeff Ross, Pete Davidson, Lizzo, Cat Williams, Chelsea Handler, and Tony Hinchcliffe. Roasts are supposed to be brutal, that's the whole deal. But one line stepped over into something else. Referencing George Floyd, the black man murdered by a police officer in 2020, Hinchcliffe told Hart that Floyd was, quote, looking up at us all, laughing so hard he can't breathe. A punchline built on the way a man actually died, under a Minneapolis officer's knee. This wasn't a stranger making a callous joke. This was the second time Hinchcliffe had joked about Floyd's death at a Netflix roast. He'd done a version of it at the Tom Brady roast, too. Floyd's family put out a statement. They said roasts push boundaries, they understood that. But they called this one deeply disappointing and in very poor taste. A protest followed in Minneapolis, where Floyd was killed. And inside the building, one roaster had already had enough: Chelsea Handler. Days later, on Dion Cole's podcast, she didn't hold back. She called the material gross. She said the jokes about lynching and Floyd weren't jokes, they were lazy. And she went further. In Handler's telling, Gillis and Hinchcliffe weren't just edgy. She claimed they were racist, bigoted, sexist. That's her characterization, her allegation, not a finding of fact.
They're racist, that they're bigots, that they're sexist, that they think they're like invincible.
So let's separate what's contested from what's not. What's claimed: that these comedians are bigots as people. That's Handler's opinion. Hinchcliffe denies it flatly. What's fact? The joke was told. The family condemned it. It was the second Floyd joke in 2 roasts, and the special was still a monster hit. Both of those things are true at the same time. And that tension, funny to millions, painful to a grieving family, is the exact fault line the whole comedy world was about to fall into. Because so far, this is comedians versus a joke. Then Joe Rogan picked up a microphone. Here's the part most of the headlines skipped. This wasn't new between these people. Back at the roast itself, before any podcast, before any backlash, Handler had already taken a shot at Hinchcliffe. She asked the room, with him sitting right there, who was keeping Joe Rogan's company, now that Tony was out for the night. That wasn't random. Rogan and Hinchcliffe go back years. Same podcast world, same comedy clubs. Kill Tony lives in that universe. When you come for Tony in that circle, you come for Joe. And that's the thing to understand. This was never going to stay a one-on-one. Comedy in 2026 has camps. One side built on the podcast, no rules, say anything ethos. The other saying some lines shouldn't be crossed for a laugh. Handler wasn't a lone voice either. Wanda Sykes turned the roast down and called the writing lazy.
Just lazy. Just lazy writing.
Michael Chi backed out and took shots at the writer's room. The Wayans weighed in. D.L. Hewley weighed in.
I think it's ridiculous to blame a man for a joke he didn't tell.
So when Rogan finally spoke, he wasn't answering one critic. He was answering all of them at once. And he did not come gently. On his podcast, Rogan drew a line in the sand. He said something almost reasonable first, that if you're a regular person who doesn't get roast culture and the jokes feel cruel, he understands that. Fair. But comedians who got upset, his message to them was, and I'm cleaning this up, F all the way off, you traitor.
Why those jokes are so mean, I get it. But comedians that are getting upset about these roast jokes, all the way off. Just all the way off.
All the way?
You f***ing traitor.
All the way off.
You know what this is. You know exactly what this is. You're a f***ing traitor.
That was the word. Traitor. His argument was simple. You know what a roast is. You know the rules going in, you're going for blood. So you can say a joke went too far. That's allowed. But pretending these comics are actual racists, actual Nazis, just for telling roast jokes? That, to Rogan, was the real betrayal. Comedians using a tragedy to boost themselves. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. Because the easy assumption was that Kevin Hart, the guy whose name was on the marquee, the guy who took the heat, would distance himself, apologize, smooth it over. He did the opposite. On The Breakfast Club, Charlemagne pushed him. Did Tony go too far? Hart didn't flinch. He said the joke wasn't tasteful, he'd never tell it himself. But he refused to condemn it. He said Hinchcliffe arguably had the best set of the night. And when they asked why he didn't stop it live, he snapped, "Stop talking as if I said it."
Remove me from it, I didn't say it. If you are upset that the night went on, it's a different conversation. It's nothing I can do. It's a production. It's a live production.
So the man at the center of the storm sided with the storm. That's when a backlash became a war. So how did it actually end? Honestly, it didn't, not cleanly. Hinchcliffe fired back at Handler on his own show. He claimed she didn't even write her own roast material. He said the media coverage was a lie, that nothing you read is real, you had to watch it yourself. He got personal. Then he moved on, like nothing happened. Gillis barely engaged. He shrugged Handler off, said good for her for capitalizing on the moment, and plugged his next show. Handler never walked it back. She said her friend Kevin deserved a more elevated roast. She knew the others would go to the bottom of the barrel, and they did. And the numbers? 13.5 million people watched, down just 2% from the Brady roast, which is the uncomfortable part. The outrage and the success weren't opposites. They were the same engine. And that same engine had been running Tony's whole career. None of this was new. This was a pattern. Rewind to May 2021. Hinchcliffe was dropped by his own talent agency, WME, after a video went viral of him hurling an anti-Asian slur at a fellow comedian, the very man who had just introduced him on stage. Shows got canceled, sponsors walked. For almost any career, that's the ending. His barely slowed down. He never apologized. He said flat out that comedians never should. His podcast, Kill Tony, kept swelling into sold-out arenas and one of the biggest live shows in all of comedy. A new agency, UTA, signed him, and Netflix reportedly handed him a 4 special deal, 3 for Kill Tony, 1 for his own hour. That hour became Man of the People. Sit with that. The rally that made him toxic to half the country is the same rally that made him valuable to the industry. If you've heard comedians like Cat Williams argue that the industry manufactures its stars, that it decides who rises and who vanishes, no matter who's actually the most talented, this is about the cleanest example you will ever find. Nobody voted for Tony Hinchcliffe to headline Netflix. A handful of executives did. And that decision was about to slam into the one thing no executive can manufacture. The special dropped, and everyone braced for the obvious fight. The teaser practically dared you into it. Hinchcliffe opening by bragging about every group he's made fun of. Everyone expected him to go too far. Instead, something much stranger happened. He went nowhere. The reviews didn't call him offensive. They called him boring. Vulture's line cut deepest. The special, they wrote, isn't bad because it's offensive. It's bad because it's incompetent. Critics described aimless crowd work. Jokes that played like rough drafts. A man visibly sweating through his own hour. The scandal-proof comedian had hit a problem no scandal could fix. The material just wasn't good. And here's what makes that land like a gut punch. This is a man who wrote for the Comedy Central roasts. Roasting is the one thing he is supposed to be elite at. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. His own fans said it too. On the Kill Tony subreddit, his most loyal audience on the planet, a top post stated it flatly. Tony is not a stand-up comedian. Fans wrote about shutting it off partway through, about being simply disappointed. These weren't his enemies. These were the people who buy the arena tickets. That's the real story here. The outrage machine could make Tony Hinchcliffe famous. It could make him rich. It could make him unavoidable. It could not make him funny. And when the controversy cleared and the lights came up, funny is the only thing a comedy special is actually there to do. So how did it actually end? Here's the uncomfortable part. Nothing happened to him. The special slid from number 3 to number 5, but it stayed a hit. He never apologized. Not for the roast, not for Handler, not for any of it. The Floyd family launched a petition asking Netflix and Kevin Hart to donate the roast proceeds to a nonprofit they founded in George's name. It gathered more than 10,000 signatures. Netflix said nothing. The roast stayed up. The special stayed up. The checks cleared. No cancellation, no reckoning, just a strange new normal, where a platform can push a special to the very top of its charts that its own core audience won't sit through. Which means the thing that came out of this weakest wasn't Tony Hinchcliffe at all. It was the idea that being popular and being good were ever the same thing. So who won? Netflix got its top 10 slot. Tony got his check and his loyal army. The critics got to be right. The only clear loser is the belief that the market rewards the best comedian in the room. Because the industry didn't pick Tony Hinchcliffe because he was the funniest. It picked him because he was the loudest. And loud sells, which leaves one question hanging over all of it. If executives can float a special its own fans reject, who really decides who gets famous in comedy? And who gets buried? The truth is, nobody started this comedy civil war. The roast just exposed a split that was already there and handed everyone a microphone to shout across it. The lesson? In 2026, the line between too far and the whole point isn't a line anymore. It's a battlefield. If you want the full story of how Kevin Hart and Cat Williams ended their war on that same stage, that one's already up. Watch it next.